don't look sleepy and don't look too ecstatic today, but I'm gonna get it all worked out. All right. All right, this is Sports for Real with Coach O. We're standing on the precipice of the college football playoffs. And before that, we have to get through these conference championship games. A lot of these schools have been in playoff mode for a while now. And it's just a matter of, can they get to the finish line? The big matchup tonight, you have Texas and Georgia going at it. Got some comments about that. Right now, we get ready to kick off the Big 12 championship between Arizona State and Iowa State. Tonight, you also have the ACC game between SMU and Clemson. But the big question is, does SMU belong on the big stage? Just to give you some context about what's going on here, the last couple of days I've been talking to some fans, and they recount the fact that teams like Alabama and Georgia, and from the Big Ten, from the SEC and the Big Ten, those big conferences, they've pretty much been in playoff mode for several weeks now. But then you have schools like the ACC, and not necessarily the Big 12, but there are some schools that a lot of people don't think should be on the big stage. And I mentioned SMU because a lot of the fans say that SMU, they shouldn't be there. And for that fact, nor should Indiana. Well, when they come up with all these super conferences and they got all these teams mixed and matched, I told you before that at the top you have 2 or 3 teams. At the bottom of each conference, you're going to have 2 or 3 teams. And in the middle, everybody else. Most of the time, you have teams that are in the bottom. They're now filtering toward the top. And why is that? Well, we don't have the same softness that we've always had in college football during the regular season. We pretty much could tell years ago what the 2 or 3 games were going to be to decide who plays for all the marbles. But now, not only do you have a bigger pool to deal with, you mix it up with everybody else. So you don't have that smooth road that you used to have to make it through to these conference championship games. But when I had a conversation yesterday with a fella I work with, he tells me about how schools like Alabama and Georgia, they deserve to nod over teams like in Indiana or SMU because they played a tougher schedule. Therefore, they should get more consideration because when you boil it down to it, the teams from, well, specifically SMU and Indiana cannot compete with a team like Georgia or Alabama. Well, I was doing a little ride share thing today, and the same kind of thing popped up. He said that these teams have been in playoff mode, and because they've been in playoff modes, most of the time just get a team like SMU and even going back to a TCU to get on the big stage, and either they freeze up or they get overmatched. Sometimes both, like in the case with TCU. They played great throughout the season, but when it came time to win a championship, they froze. It's almost like they looked around and saw, man, how did we get here? So I can understand the mindset of where these guys come from when they say that some teams don't deserve to be on the big stage. So I asked the question, well, what if these teams play themselves on the big stage? You guys say it doesn't matter. So basically, the question that's lingering out there, SMU is taking on Clemson tonight in the ACC championship game. And it's been said that if SMU were to lose to Clemson, then SMU is going to be completely out of the playoff picture. Now, they do have one loss. They lost early in the year to BYU by 3 points. Since then, they rattled off 9 straight victories. If they beat Clemson, it would be 10 victories. And that would be a reputable opponent. Well, let's see what SMU has done throughout the season. Now, granted, when these schedules come out and people make their projections, it's based on the competition that those programs were able to accomplish in the past. So when you look at Indiana, say in Michigan, you're going to look at the history of Indiana football and say they have no chance against Michigan, especially since Michigan won the championship. But SMU, when the season started, of course, they played BYU. They lost that game. They played Florida State, who only lost 1 game last year. Louisville's been a decent program. Virginia's middle of the road, but they're up and coming. Pittsburgh is a dangerous threat. Boston College were playing well at the beginning of the year, and you had the new transplants from the Pac-12. When you look at that schedule, nobody's really counting on SMU to do anything based on what those teams have done in the past. Well, they were able to defeat all of those teams and make it all the way through the ACC undefeated. Like I said, the only team that beat them was BYU. Therefore, SMU has played themselves into this position. Now, they have the one loss, and people say if they lose, they should get jumped by a school like Alabama. But I want to talk about Alabama in a second here. But the other team that they talk about is Indiana. They say that Indiana doesn't deserve to be in the college football playoffs, basically because they don't have a history. So again, I asked the question, what if they played their way into that position? Well, when the season came out, let's look at some of the teams they had to go against. They had to play against the two teams that played for the national championship last year, Washington and Michigan. They played Ohio State. They played Powers, Nebraska. And they pretty much ran through everybody except Ohio State. Now, when you look at the final score of Ohio State, it looks like they were obliterated. That was not the case. That game was a tie game about 2-3 minutes before halftime when the punter from Indiana made a mistake. Then they give up a long kickoff return for a touchdown in the second half. And if you turned on the game and you saw them down 28-7, you say they're getting stomped. Not the case at all. But I will say this. They got beat pretty good last year by Michigan, something like 52-7. So when they played Michigan, I can kind of see that they had that TCU thing going on just a little bit. Like, hey, we're playing Michigan. Indiana's not supposed to beat Michigan. And they sputtered throughout that game until they finally got their legs together and they started playing some football. Same kind of thing happened against Ohio State. Their first drive, they came out playing good football, but then they realized, kind of like TCU, hey, man, we're on the big stage. And are we really supposed to be here? Then they started making mistakes as if they weren't supposed to be there. And then when all the things snowballed against them, against the Buckeyes, then they started to say, well, we might as well just go ahead and play some football. And we got the results we wanted to see if we we're going to be afraid. And then they started to play. Well, if the team that they show all year long and the resiliency they showed against Michigan and the bounce back in the Ohio State game, that team shows up in the playoffs, Indiana can be dangerous. So are they worthy of a chance to play in the playoffs? I think so, because they played themselves into that position. We're not playing against history. If you're going to talk about history, then I think you need to separate divisions. Boise State clinched their way into the playoffs last night, and a lot of people don't think that they can play. Well, I took a closer look at Boise State last night, and they're a pretty good football team. The only game they lost was a 3-pointer to number 1 Oregon. And that running back they have, he is for real. I'm not sure if he's going to win the Heisman or not, but they can be a formidable opponent in the playoffs, especially if they play that game at home. Now, I think that the playoffs, not the playoffs, but the conference championship games are going to pretty much go to form. I think Arizona State's been playing the best football for the last month and a half in the Big 12. I expect them to get by Iowa State. Later on tonight, I think that the way that SMU has been playing, they should be able to get by Clemson. But again, Clemson is a wild card because they kind of go up and down with how their quarterback plays, Klubnik. But they can compete definitely with Clemson. But the big game that's going to determine things and create all the controversy is the SEC championship with Texas and Georgia. Now, you know that Georgia went into Athens and they beat Texas. They jumped out to a sizable lead. They put pressure on the quarterback, and they dominated the line of scrimmage. And it showed some cracks in Quinn Ewers' game. He holding on to the ball too long, and the line just couldn't protect that guy, Jaywan Walker. I think his name, Jayon or Jaywan, whatever his name is. He's coming off that football, and he's going to make the pros. So if Ewers expects to be a high draft pick, he's going to have to learn how to get rid of that ball quicker. And I think he learned a hard lesson when he played against the Bulldogs the first time. But Georgia hasn't played that great since they beat Texas. And And I predicted, because normally when you have rematches in championship games, the team that lost the first time has the advantage, because that first team is going to pretty much do what they did the first time to win the game. Well, I don't think Georgia can depend on that. Now, I saw reports the other day that they're starting to quietly get back some people who have been injured, and they may help their cause. But I think what you need to look for tonight in this game is the adjustments that Texas is going to make. Like I said, I still don't think that Texas front can protect long enough for yours on a sustained basis. So if Texas has any hope of defeating Georgia, they're going to have to do two things. They're going to hit the back in the flat, and they're going to have to run the screen game. I think what you're going to see, they're going to run some screens behind Walker to slow him down. And once they're able to do that, they're going to run the football up in there just to keep things honest. And I think Texas, with the play calling of Sarkisian, is going to keep Georgia off balance tonight. And that's where the problem begins. I think that Texas, I picked them to win the SEC all along, and I still think they probably going to win the national championship. But the problem is, if Georgia does lose, now you're creating problems with the selection process. I heard Joe Tessitore say the other day, I think that's his name, the broadcaster. He said that if Georgia got by Georgia Tech, then they're automatically into the playoffs. I disagree. That's the same thing they were saying last year. They went into the SEC championship game undefeated, lost to Alabama, and they got left all the way out of the playoffs. I think they deserved to be in the playoffs last year, but not so this year. If they lose, I think that Georgia should be out. But a lot of people saying that they're in. So let's just assume that they're in. What about Alabama? Alabama with 3 losses and Georgia with 3 losses, who do you take? Well, head-to-head is the first tiebreaker, right? Alabama beat Georgia. So I think we might be looking at the same thing that happened to Georgia last year if they were to lose this game. That puts Alabama in the position to jump them. And regardless of how I may feel about it or anybody else, Alabama is and always probably will be the bell cow of the SEC. So in things of doubt, expect Alabama to jump Georgia when you have to take one of the two. You saw it last year, and I think if they lose tonight, they're going to happen again. So the question is, who does get in the playoffs? Does Tennessee deserve to be there? What about Ole Miss with 3 losses? Should they still be considered? Well, this is where the controversy comes in. Because what you're basically going to have, if Indiana gets in, Ohio State gets in, Penn State gets in, and Oregon, you got 4 Big Ten teams. You're going to probably have 4 SEC teams in. So that's 2 conferences with 8 teams in a 12-conference playoff. If you're going to keep one or 2 conferences dominating everything, maybe you should just have the top 4 of each conference just play each other in the top 8 in the big division championship. And then schools like Boise State and everybody else, maybe they should play a lower tier playoffs. That's basically what it's setting up to be. Going back to what the guy said, that maybe these teams probably couldn't beat Alabama or Georgia in the playoffs, and they just taking up a spot. But where does the fairness come in? Where do you draw the line? Doesn't matter how many teams you let in the playoffs, somebody's going to get left off, and somebody's going to be complaining, and then there's going to be calls for change, and in 2 years they're going to change it, and then we're going to be back to the drawing board, and it's going to be the same kind of thing. So the real question is, how do you fix it all? I have no idea. But based on the criteria that they have, there's no way that you can let or not accept, I don't know what's going on here. Nobody's talking to me today. I don't know how you cannot put Indiana in and SMU in, but to say that they shouldn't make the playoffs if they were to lose to Clemson, I don't think that's going to fly. And if that is the case, then it's going to be a major uproar. It's going to be an uproar anyway, but it's just a matter of how many teams of the SEC and the Big Ten get in. So that leaves the Big 12. They're just going to have one team. ACC look like they're just going to have the one team. And Boise State, and I don't know who the other team is. So get ready for some shock next week when they release this bracket. But tonight should be some good football. I'm interested in seeing the coaching aspects of it. It doesn't always come down to the players. Yes, the players play, but the coaches put them in position to play. Texas got their eyes open the first time they played Georgia because they couldn't quite handle that front. And when you add to the fact that Quinn Ewers was holding that ball just a little bit too long, it opened the floodgates. And they bounced back, but the adjustments tonight are going to be key. And how much do these people coming off injuries for Georgia, how much is that going to help them? Those are two things you might want to look at. But I'm going to stick with my pick. I think Texas is going to come up with the key to beat Georgia. Georgia's been living on the edge, just like Miami has been living on the edge all year, and that came back to bite them. Georgia's been lucky. If the quarterback from Florida, he doesn't get hurt, they're going to lose that game. So the window of opportunity for Georgia is closing. Now, they can rise up, and they're certainly capable because they got a lot of heart in their second half team. They're certainly capable of winning it. But if they come out and play the way they've been playing and Beck keeps throwing those interceptions, then Georgia won't be long. Trust me. But the key is, if they lose to Texas tonight, and especially by maybe 2 scores, look for Georgia to get another shock like they did last year and have Alabama jump them. If they do, they might get them in as a 12 seed, or maybe put Ole Miss in because Ole Miss took them behind the woodshed. So it's going to be some interesting times next week when that schedule comes out and the playoffs come out. But today, I expect Arizona State, the hottest team in the Big 12, to continue that. And Oregon and Penn State, I think Penn State is capable, but Oregon, I think they're just a little bit too strong for Penn State. Penn State make a little bit too many mistakes, and they're not going to be able to catch Oregon if they fall too far behind. But I remember these two teams played in the Rose Bowl. When they had Kajana Carter at Penn State, he's on the sideline downgrading the Pac-12 and how sorry their teams are, and Oregon shouldn't be on the same field with them. Well, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it might just be the same way that Oregon might be looking at Penn State. But that's going to be another interesting matchup to watch. But again, the best game is probably going to be Texas and Georgia. But expect some fireworks in the Arizona State game. There's also going to be some fireworks in that in the ACC game with SMU. They are playing pretty good football, and a lot of players, people don't know about that particular team. So if it's a close game, even if they lost, I think SMU is deserving of a playoff spot. But we'll see. What say you? But I just want to chime in before the games actually got going well. If things heat up later on, then I'll chime back in and see if I can get somebody to go back and forth with me, because this is an important day in college football, mainly because people are jockeying for positions, and this is the first time that we've all witnessed this kind of action in college football, and it's made the sport exciting. So I'm with it. What about you? So until next time, this has been Sports for Real. Catch up with you guys next time. I'm out.